Papalois the week before. Papalois is a man able to sleep only 3 hours, and believe you me, is a great opportunity for all of us to have him here with us. And now, if you allow me, I'm going to tell something about your CV very briefly, that I know is very extensive. I'm going to do it in Spanish, if you don't mind. El profesor Papalois es ahora el secretario general de UEMS y dentro de un mes será el presidente, porque hoy se cerraba el plazo de candidaturas a la presidencia de la UEMS. La UEMS, sabéis que es la Unión Europea de Médicos Especialistas, que agrupa 1.600.000 médicos especialistas en toda Europa, y el único candidato a ser, con lo cual, obviamente, salud por medio y Dios mediante, será el nuevo presidente de UEMS. Previamente él fue vicepresidente, posteriormente secretario general y ahora será presidente. El enorme cambio que ha conseguido Vasilios en la UEMS ha sido absoluto, pero no solamente en el terreno científico, en esos 3 ámbitos de profesión, de formación posgrado, de formación media continuada y de calidad asistencial, sino curiosamente en el financiero. Es decir, que es un hombre holístico. La UEMS tuvo una crisis financiera hace 5 años y desde la llegada a la vicepresidencia de Vasilios la cosa ha cambiado radicalmente. No estamos completamente saneados, pero sin ninguna duda UEMS ahora es la institución europea más potente que representa a los médicos especialistas en Europa. Pero él lo que es cirujano. Él es el jefe de servicio de Hammersmith, del Imperial College en Londres, es catedrático. Él es actualmente el presidente de la Sociedad Europea de Trasplantes, viene de Copenhague, como he dicho, de un congreso que ha reunido a 4.000 delegados. Y termino ya, porque si sigo es abrumadora la categoría profesional que tiene, pero acaba de ser nombrado por el gobierno griego en una acción política conjunta, no de un partido o de otro, sino en el Parlamento Europeo, en el Parlamento griego. Todos los grupos políticos han apoyado a Vasilios como nuevo coordinador nacional de trasplantes para montar el sistema con una fundación que bien conocéis, que es la Fundación Onassis. As I said, I think it's a big opportunity for all of us to have you here today. He is not only a surgeon, he's a whole man. He's a Da Vinci of nowadays. And we're very lucky. So the room is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me or do I need to use this? I don't need to use this. You can hear me. First of all, to express my most grateful thanks to the Spanish Medical Council, to Tomas for this kind invitation. It's a great honor to be with you today. And to start by saying that you have the warm regards of the whole of the UEMS executive and our most grateful thanks for all the work and all the support that Spanish colleagues have offered to the UEMS over the last 60 years. It is immensely appreciated. And I always say that Spain is not only an extremely advanced, extremely respected, extremely powerful leading country in Europe and the world. Spain is also the window of Europe to the Spanish-speaking world. And this is massively important. And we pay a lot of attention to it, and it's something that we really want to develop. You know better than I do that there are more people on this planet having Spanish as their native language compared to those who have English as their native language. Because many people speak English as their second and third language, but not as their native language. And this is hugely important and something we wish to elaborate on. What I would like to do over the next half an hour or so is to share with you the work that we have done in Europe through the UEMS and our partner organizations over the last 60 years, and especially over the last few years, to develop this whole portfolio of continuing medical education and professional development, because it is a massive and holistic and complementary portfolio. Trying to focus and dissect more into the issue of the assessments, which is part of the work that you are doing these 2 days in Minorca, and using some practical examples as to how we do this at the European level, and if it is successful or not, because this is also massively important. And I will be absolutely delighted to discuss it with you afterwards and have your input and ideas. We are going to discuss a lot about European projects. We're going to talk a lot about European collaboration, which is hugely important. But there is a fundamental question. Do we really need European collaboration? Is there a need for that? Is there an alternative to European collaboration? There is a very good and very well-tested alternative. This is the alternative to European collaboration. Destruction, pain, war, death. That's the alternative. And especially the new generation must never forget that. And they need to go to what we call a library and open what we call the books and read about these things to remember what is the alternative to European collaboration. And this distraction was painted here, perhaps in the most well-known painting of the 20th century by the best painter of the 20th century, Pablo Picasso. And when I went to the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid and I saw Guernica in real life, just next to Guernica, as you already know, of course, they have all the sketches that Picasso produced in preparation for Guernica. So for every little square centimeter of Guernica, he made not hundreds, thousands of sketches until the final product. You can try to imagine the pain that they work. And always remind me that behind any kind of great piece of work, art or otherwise, it's 1% genius, 99% is hard work. Must never forget that. Nothing happens just because somebody clipped his fingers. Now, in the late 1950s and late 1960s, where Europe was coming again under another catastrophic war, and we had the birth of the European medical organizations. The UEMS is the oldest and the biggest by far European medical organization, but not the only one. There are other ones with which we work very collaboratively and very friendly. And the aim of these medical organizations in Europe was very simple, to translate the European ideas and ideals about collaboration and integration into the medical profession. What was the philosophy behind it? Why we put together these European medical organizations? Simply because we believe, and we still believe, and this is in the core of our organization, that the professionals should shape their work and their future. It should not be a bureaucratic nanny someplace, somewhere in this world. It should not be people that have nothing to do with our profession and our patients. It should be us that will be shaping our own future. That is in the core of our organization. The UEMS is 61 years old now. It represents 40 countries through formally their national medical associations. So the General Council of Spain, the Spanish Medical Association, represents Spain into the UEMS with the voting rights. And the same thing counts for all the others full members, which are the country members of the European Union and the broader European Economic Area. All the other countries are observing countries, and they have participated in the Council, but they don't have voting rights. So the national medical associations are the organization, are the soul and the essence of the organization. Now, the work of the organization on the ground is being done by the 60 specialist bodies, our sections, divisions, and multidisciplinary joint committees where collaboration between sections is considered to be necessary. And most importantly, the UEMS represents approximately 1.6 million medical specialists in Europe and beyond. And if you ask me what is the value of the work that we do, I will say exactly this. Through this, it has the ratification of whatever we do of 1.6 million people of 40 countries. Anybody can sit on a table with a cup of coffee and write training requirements, guidelines, who cares? But what we do gets the approval of this, and this is the gravitas behind it. This is the importance behind it. The characteristics of the UEMS, first of all, it's an inclusive organization. It was an organization built to bring professionals together and not to leave them out. Rule number one. Secondly, is a European Medical Senate, not a parliament, where all countries are equal around the table, regardless of their size, their population, or their financial muscle. And the three pylons of the organizations are the national medical associations, the Spanish General Medical Council representing Spain, the specialist divisions, and of course, all the partnerships we have around the world with other international organizations, with colleges, with universities, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's a very broad partnership. We are based at the Domus Medica Europea in Brussels, which is the headquarters of the UEMS, which was built and was meant to be the hub for collaboration of medical professionals across Europe. It took us many years of painful work to do it, and Tomas has witnessed all this pain over the last few years, how difficult it was, and part of the fact that I'm so gray now, it is because of the building of the Domus Medica Europea, but it's now done and dusted and it's functioning, and I'm proud to say that it's fully operational and fully rented, while in Brussels, 50% of office space is left empty because it's so much available and it's not needed, but the Domus is fully operational. What are the aims of the UEMS? In a nutshell, colleagues, to advance European health policy. How do we break this down? To promote the interests of medical specialists in Europe, promote high standards of education and training, high standards of clinical practice and care, quality assurance in specialist training, practice and care, and last but not least, promote continuing medical education and professional development. This is one of the massive issues, and we will focus today from all this on the last one. Continuing medical education and professional development. There was a consensus statement by all the European medical organizations in a meeting that took place in Luxembourg in December of 2015. And this is the definition, simple, but I believe powerful. It includes many forms of education and training that allow individual doctors to maintain and improve standards of medical practice through the development of, and this is the crucial bit, knowledge, skill, attitude, and behavior. And these 4 pylons are reflected in all the projects that we do. Knowledge, skill, attitude, and behavior. Okay? Massively, massively important. Also, we put at the core, at the essence of it, at the center of medical education and professional development, the individual. Not the institution, not the great professor, but the individual. We empower the individual. To remember the words of the great American founding father of the American nation, Benjamin Franklin, tell me, I will forget. Teach me, I might remember. Involve me, and I will learn. And that's what we do. We involve the professionals, and we give them a chance to develop. What are the principles? How do we see CME CPD? First of all, we see it as a clinical and professional duty. It is our duty. It's not a hobby. It is not an academic interest. It is our duty. It's part of what we are doing. Secondly, it is also an ethical obligation. We can't say that we are professionals serving patients and we don't have the obligation to improve ourselves to be able to do this properly. It should be in the hands of the profession, and I explained why, free from any kind of commercial influence or any other influence, any political influence, any religious influence, any kind of influence. From graduation to retirement, again, it has to cover the whole spectrum of our lives, from the moment we get out of medical school all the way to the moment we will retire in Minorca, for example, and enjoy ourselves. It should be meaningful in professional life. We should not create things that are totally meaningless for people, that they will not take them home and implement them into their day-to-day practice. It will be just a diploma which is meaningless to everybody else. Affordable, okay? We're talking about people who have limited budgets, and we also need to think about the whole of Europe. We need to think about our Eastern European colleagues, for example, that their monthly salary, okay, it's minuscule compared to what is happening in the rest of Europe. And finally, last but not least, we need national and European CME CPD. We need national products and European products. I don't need to debate why we need national ones, but the question is, why we need European ones? What is the point? We all come from very developed countries. I mean, Spain, France, Germany, the whole of Europe is a very well-developed, place on the earth. We have products like this. Why we need European ones as well? Do we need them? My answer is yes, and I will explain why. What is the direction of healthcare around the world? Let's have a look at it. First of all, we have the aging population. Massive challenge, undisputable challenge in Europe and all over the world. To give you an example, very practical, a little bit lighthearted, when it comes to organ donation, okay, which is my field of work and transplantation, when I was a trainee in transplantation, the average donor looked a little bit like this, like an Olympic gold medalist. When I became a consultant specialist about a quarter of a century ago, the average donor looked a little bit like that. Now that I'm a professor and I teach other people how to do it, the average donor looks like this. And this is not only for transplantation, this is for every element of our practice, and we need to address it. Secondly, we address vulnerable people, okay? And especially the 2 extremes of the population, the pediatric and the geriatric, massively important. Also, people want services closer to home, again, especially for the 2 extremes of the population, the pediatric and the geriatric. The era that somebody was prepared to travel for 500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers for the big professor has come and gone. People want to have the care where they are, where their home and their family and their friends to support them are. Also, we empower the patients. The shift of power is clear from the doctor to the patient. The patient is in the center of the decision-making process as to what they want, what kind of life they anticipate. Once upon a time, we were gods. We knew everything, we could do everything. Everything we were saying was accepted. This era is gone completely. The patient is getting more and more of this power, and I believe rightly so. We can debate it. Also, patient-reported outcome measures. Again, to mention my field of transplantation, once upon a time we were doing a kidney transplant, we were measuring a creatinine after that, it was normal, success. This is not success anymore. You need to improve the quality of life of the patient. The patient has to feel happier compared to what it was before. And rightly so, because you're not addressing a creatinine, you are addressing an individual, and you want to improve the life of the individual and not just a number. New World, New Realities is about how movable is the whole of the medical profession. It is the most movable profession on the face of the earth. The nurses are following. Okay? From all the other professions in the world, doctors are the ones who are moving across countries all the time. What is the reason? It's very simple. It's because medical knowledge, is all over the world. People want to travel and get it. They come back to practice. They go back to learn more. It is the nature of the beast, actually, and it is undisputable. Also, immigration. A picture says 1,000 words. Look at the overall direction of worldwide immigration. It's very impressive. It's not North and South America. It is not the developed economies in the East. It is not the Gulf. It is good old-fashioned Europe. Okay, this is the direction of travel, and it's undisputable. Most probably because of our huge record in protecting human rights. Also, we have legislation that came at the European level that changes the scene completely. In my view, colleagues, this is the most important piece of European legislation over the last 50 years in the area of healthcare. And what it says here, it talks not about the right of the patients to move, but about the rights of the patients who move. Because these patients who move around Europe to get health care, they want quality of training, quality of care, and quality of outcomes. Quality, quality, quality at the very essence of it. That has to be protected and to be promoted. Specialism and the invasion of technology. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, at the Congress we had in Copenhagen, one of the last talks predicted that 20 years from now, there will be mathematical algorithms that they will be guiding our decision-making process. Almost 50% of our work will be done by computers, basically. The doctor will still be there and will be dominant, but you can imagine it's a world changing around us completely. Specialties and subspecialties. In the United States, as usually, they are over the top. They have 158 specialties and subspecialties. Canada, 67. Here in Europe, we are a little bit more conservative, 55. But it's still a fact of life that we go into specialism and more specialism. Look at these statistics by the European Commission. By 2020, which is tomorrow morning, basically, literally tomorrow morning, we will be down by 1 million healthcare professionals in Europe. Not only doctors, nurses, pharmacists, healthcare professionals altogether. 1 million compared to what is needed. And also, not only we don't have the numbers, we don't have the right ones. Because through specialism and super specialism, finally, we don't have the generalists. We don't have the people who will do the bread and butter work for the population, especially the aging population. I mean, you talk to any one of my students today at Imperial College, what do you want to do? I want to be a robotic surgeon of the upper pole of the right adrenal gland. Wonderful. Wonderful. You will serve 2 patients a year. But humanity needs much more than that, and we are not prepared for that. Workforce planning. How behind we are in that. Everybody gets into the profession and they go any way they want. Fine. But finally, they might end up unemployed, or they might end up serving something that doesn't exist anymore. Vascular surgery, as we know it, has changed completely, dramatically. And the list goes on and on and on. So we need to prepare to have the right people with the right training, at the right numbers, at the right place, and at the right time. Work-life balance. Again, once upon a time, working like an animal and being institutionalized in a hospital was considered to be a great thing. Okay, it was considered to be amazing. The place I trained in the States, I remember we were 2 years of fellowship, 2 years of on-call on a daily basis. And it was busy on a daily basis. I remember I was going home and I was saying to my wife, I have 20 minutes, it's either sleeping or eating. I prefer sleeping before I get back and go to the hospital. I mean, this is no more. People want to have a life, and rightly so. From the moment you get institutionalized, you become dangerous. From the moment the only air you can breathe is the air of the hospital, and the only food you can taste is the food of the canteen of the hospital, you become institutionalized and you are dangerous. You are very dangerous. We need to wake up. These problems that I presented to you, These are not Spanish problems. These are not Swedish problems. These are not Maltese or Romanian problems. These are pan-European problems. And because they are pan-European problems, they need and deserve a proper European answer. It's not if we want to, it is that we have to. How do you do this? A European project is a recipe for catastrophe when somebody will wake one day in Brussels and say, I have this bright idea as to how you are doing CME, CPD across Europe. And you have to comply with this by next Monday, and if you don't, you have a problem. This is a recipe for disaster. A European project is a massive success when it follows the bottom-up approach. You start with what exists, with what people have already achieved. You respect it. You build on that. You build collaborations. And finally, you translate this into a European consensus. Then you have a massively successful European project. And don't forget, in Europe, we don't believe in the survival of the fittest, as our colleagues across the pond believe. Those who are strong have every right to be stronger. Those who are not deserve a helping hand. That's how we work in Europe. And that's why sometimes we have the big debates and the council meeting and everything else, and people say, in my country, we are so much ahead of this. Congratulations. But the point here is to bring every country to this level, not to congratulate only your country. We can learn from what your country has achieved, but we want to translate this to everybody else. So, how we're addressing these challenges that we've just spoken about in the UEMS in real life with pragmatic projects. And Thomas, I'm sure he can recall that I always say at the council meeting that if there is one thing this organization prides itself on, is that we are doing real projects for real people in real life. Not statements of the nature that life is better than death and health is better than illness. You don't need the European Medical Organization to tell you that. You know that. You need something that you can touch really with your hands. First of all, the European training requirements and assessments. That goes directly into the core and the heart of your retreat and your discussion this couple of days. How do we create those European training requirements? It starts always by the relevant UEMS section. Pediatrics, cardiology, orthopedics, and the list goes on and on and on. It involves the national scientific societies represented in the section. So immediately you can see all Europe, through their national scientific societies, feed into the project. It involves also the European scientific societies, which is massively important. And it utilizes expertise from universities, from colleges, from other authorities from all over the world. So it's a massive project. Then there is a wide and in-depth discussion regarding the training requirements, and they are always break down into clinical, academic, and professionals, the standards of clinical care linked to those requirements, the accreditation of the trainings, of the trainers, and finally the appraisal and accreditation of the training centers. So we see the whole package. There is no point at all to say this is the way somebody will be trained when you don't say how the center that will train him is going to be and how the people who are going to train him are going to be. So you have to see the whole package. And then after all these debates, we have a consensus of all parties involved, not for the lowest common denominator, but the highest commonly accepted standards. And this is paramount, this is key, this is absolutely key. Following that, it goes to the European Training Requirements Committee of the UEMS. This is a group of experts with approximately 30 years of experience in training requirements that they filter those ETRs before finally they will go to our two bodies, the sections and the council. The sections give all the sections. So somebody submits the ETRs for cardiology, all the sections, all the specialties will comment on them, and the 40 national medical associations. And it will go to the council for approval or recommendations for changes. So this process, from the moment we say we will create the European training requirements for cardiology or transplantation or orthopedics, to the moment there will be a positive vote in the council, it could be 2 years. It's a tedious process involving so many different parties, and it's of the highest quality. And I will challenge you, colleagues. I will challenge you. Raise your finger and point to me in the map another place on this planet that follows this kind of robust process to produce training requirements and assessments. It doesn't exist. It doesn't even come close to this. And not only this, it has the ratification of 40 countries. Now, let's go to a very specific paradigm. You saw how it works within the UEMS, how we produce them. Let me show you a simple, real-life paradigm as to how it works in real life. So we have my field is transplantation, and more specifically, transplantation surgery. So the UEMS has the relevant division of transplantation surgery and collaborates with the relevant European scientific society to promote those training requirements and do the assessments. The relevant European scientific society is the European Society of Organ Transplantation. The European Society of Organ Transplantation is 37 years old now, and it was the first truly multidisciplinary society focusing on education and innovation. Now, the key here is this. It has a massive educational portfolio. It has the Educational Week. It has the Transplant Learning Journey, which is basically a whole week of cross-cutting themes between the sections of the society. It has hands-on courses. It has e-books in support of education. It has the Transplant Library, which is basically a totally electronic way of education of transplanters all over the world. It has a transplant library as well, which is in the form of papers, analysis, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and all the rest of it. And of course, flagship projects like the Congress we had in Copenhagen, which attracted almost 4,000 people, the biggest Congress in the world. But what is massively important, that this massive and diverse portfolio of ESOT is UEMS and IACME compliant and accredited. So you see how it's coming together. The UEMS produced the training requirements and assessments, set the standards. The society produces a massive educational portfolio that is approved and accredited by the UEMS. So you have a fantastic package to present to the professional, okay? And then we proceed with the examinations. Over the last 14 years, we had this wonderful collaboration between the two, and this is one practical example. It is multiplied times 100 within the UEMS over the last 14 years, and we created 4 boards of accreditation, of assessment and accreditation for surgery, medicine, coordination, and immunology. The first one in the world. The Americans don't have it, the Canadians don't have it, nobody has it. The Americans send their people to Europe to get accredited through this process. Okay, massively important. So how it happens in real life? There is a process of application, eligibility, and then assessment. And you can see here that people can apply for assessment for what they really do in life. They do retrieval, kidney, pancreas, liver. They have to present their portfolio, formal portfolio, signed portfolio, that they really have these qualifications and they meet their eligibility criteria. So if a colleague from Spain, let's say, applies for the European exam, from Santander, for example, from the department of my friend Daniel Casanova, which is a transplant department, he has to present his portfolio, signed by Daniel Casanova, case by case, course by course, day by day of training. And then there will be a committee from Spain and from the UEMS to say, yes, this is a real program, this is a real trainee, and this is real stuff that he is presenting for accreditation. And the price, of course, are very affordable. Again, we keep in mind the whole of Europe. And then the examination is to perfection. People get an enormous amount of suggestive reading before to prepare, and they are supported with that. And the examination for every module, so you want to pass the kidney module, you'll be examined by 2 panels, 1 hour each. And every panel has examinations by the UEMS and external examiners, okay? And they will keep the minutes of this examination. And finally, they will decide if you have passed or not. And if there is a dispute, there is a discussion in committee at the end of the examination. So very, very robust. We don't stop this. After every examination, a detailed report is produced about the quality of the exam that goes to the UEMS, goes to the European Society, and all the authorities to tell them that this was done, it was real, and it was properly done. Is it popular? As you can see, over the last 14 years, we have accredited 482 fellows in transplantation surgery in Europe. This number is massive because transplantation, although we make a very big noise usually, it's a teeny, teeny, tiny specialty compared to cardiology or radiology or anesthesiology. We are minuscule. This is massive. And what is most important is that you don't even think of appearing in an interview for a job in Europe if you don't have this in your CV. People will not take you seriously. It's as simple as that. It's considered to be the quality control of the highest order. And this is just one example. Now, the UEMS, what did we say in the beginning? quality, 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 quality. So if we praise this and we project this, we have to implement it to ourselves first. So we have established the European Council for Medical Assessments, which is SESMA, which is a UEMS organization that constitutes of all the boards of the UEMS that conducts examinations. And this board has the responsibility, A, to produce guidelines for all the, how to put together examinations, how to conduct them, and all the rest of it, and B, to do quality control of these examinations every 2 to 3 years. So every 2 to 3 years, every board that conducts examinations in the UEMS applies to SESMA for reaccreditation. And SESMA puts together a committee of appraisers from the UEMS and from external partners, because if you don't have external people, people might say you are just judging yourself. What's the point? You need the external people as well. And this committee, there is an initial application, they have access to all the application documents, and they have also a chance to have an on-site visit in the examination. And then they appraise the examination in all these domains that you see here. I mean, my slides will be available to you, and you can use them in any way you like, so you don't need to write anything down. But you can see it's a very detailed appraisal from the moment somebody applies to the moment they tell him or her, you passed or failed, including the appeal process. And then it will come to the UEMS Council for recommendation for continuation of accreditation or rejection. So SESMA will say that the exam in transplantation surgery was appraised by SESMA, by the UEMS. This is our report. And then the National Medical Council of Spain at the council meeting will see the report and say, Spain is satisfied with this report, or Spain requires A, B, C improvements. And the same thing will be for France and for Germany and for Malta and for all the other countries as well. It is extremely robust and detailed. Also, we have preparatory courses in preparation of these assessments. Now, these preparatory courses, and this is a very delicate matter, it's not to teach people how to pass the exam, because this will be entirely inappropriate to conduct an examination and also a course that you teach people how to pass it. This is cheating. The reason we have these preparatory courses is because people ask for it. They say, I'm a Spaniard. I know how to face a Spanish panel for my examination. I know what to expect. But this is a European panel, and I'm not prepared for that. Nobody's prepared for that. So we help people through these courses to benchmark their knowledge against the European standards. So we tell them, these are the European standards, and you are that close. So this is what you need to do to get there and be ready for the examination. And also, this is the format you should expect in the examination. We use this kind of format, a panel format, an MCQ format, so that people are prepared, and if they pass and fail, it's because of knowledge and not because of technicalities, including language barriers. Okay? This is massively, massively important. And they are very popular. You can see here that transplantation surgery only organizes one preparatory course every year, which is overbooked, and the same thing stands for all the other elements of the UEMS. So we are very proud of what we have, massively proud. Are we going to stay here, sleep in peace? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Whoever accepts that what we have is wonderful and the end of the story, this is the recipe for catastrophe. So we want to prepare the future of the medical assessments. And SESMA has put together two important things. First of all, a school of European assessors. So we want to have a school that prepare people to be examiners in European assessments, to have great knowledge of the European training requirements and the way to do it. And also, working group that will debate the future of assessments. To give you a few examples, I mean, assessments today in all of the medical world, what are the assessments? Multiple choice questions, vivas, OSCEs, case scenarios, this is what we're using. Is this what we're going to use 50 years from now? People are saying, instead of asking me how I do this operation, why don't you come and see how I do this operation? Why don't you give me a hybrid model of crisis to show you that I can deal with a clinical case, instead of asking me to complete an MCQ. So we are seeing of new ways to be able to be cutting edge. Also, we have a very robust project of accreditation of centers. As I told you, we see the whole package. And I always say, important as it is to accredit the product, the trainee, it is more important to accredit the machine that produces the product. I'm using the word machine extremely liberally, to the center that produces the product. And we have this assessment process for accreditation centers, and the assessment is for their ability to train clinically, academically, and professionally. And the process we follow is pretty similar to the process we follow for the accreditation of the exams. So the center that applies gives a full application of what they do. what is the personnel, what are the training opportunities, what are the facilities they have. It's a book of application. And the currency is not how many surgeries or whatever the big professor is doing. The currency is how much activity they have per trainee. This is what we care. The big professor is his own business. The trainee, how much the trainee does. And of course, again, at the end, this committee produces a report that gives accreditation or recommends recommendations. Now, the European Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education. So this is the last part of the package. Remember, we said we have the center, we have the trainer, we have the trainee. Now we have the material of education per se. The European Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education was set up approximately 20 years ago, aiming to ensure that education provided to professionals in Europe was of the highest quality, the highest standards, and totally unbiased from any kind of influence. And the beauty of the UEMS and IACME accreditation is the fact that it has this triangle way of doing it. So if an event is taking place, let's say Barcelona, Madrid, in Sevilla, in Spain, they will apply to the UEMS. Then the event will be judged by the UEMS office, by the General Medical Council of Spain, and by the specialty of the UEMS responsible for this event. If it's an event in cardiology, it will be the cardiologist. In orthopedic surgery, the orthopedic surgeons. So you have this triangle review of the European organization, the specialism, and the country to say, yes, in consensus, this is good stuff. And believe me, the process is very tedious and very robust and very important. And we have a record number of applications, more than 2,000 applications per year. I was saying to Tomas over coffee, we had a record number this year. This year will be a new record number. And we accredit live and educational events and e-learning material and all sorts of other events in the modern world, like e-platforms, e-libraries, hybrid models, apps, and the list goes on. Now, what is massively important is that the credits that IACME gives, so the one credit that IACME will give to this event that will take place in Madrid, and it will be accredited by the UEMS, the European professional can take this credit and cash it in any other European country. And also the Americans and the Canadians will also recognize it. So it's an international currency of medical education, and that's the value of it. That's the value of it. Now, the new frontier, the computer, modified my slides a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. It's a bit futuristic. This was IACME up to now. IACME 2.0 is what we have created over the last 2 or 3 years. And we converted it into a much faster and efficient process with a much more efficient platform. We embrace all sorts of state-of-the-art education, e-platforms, e-libraries, apps, and everything else. I can tell you, colleagues, I see on a daily basis applications for educational accreditation coming from the 4 corners of the earth. Every day I see something new. It's astonishing. The way people find to be able to provide education, it's beautiful to see it. It's absolutely astonishing. Also, we proceeded with recognition of professional qualifications, so people can apply for credits both for being leaders in their field, examiners in PhDs, for all sorts of qualifications. We work with other healthcare professionals to help them to establish their accreditation processes, and we give a lot of emphasis on the quality control of the events. And IACME 3.0 is underway, with already 2 pilot projects on working with other healthcare, first of all, recognition of professional qualifications. The new thing that we have added is the accreditation of people who are reviewers in journals, and journals can apply to us en bloc for all the reviewers that they had over the last year. And this is already up and running. We have applications for that, and we believe it will change the face of this kind of recognition dramatically. Collaboration with other healthcare professionals, already 2 pilot projects, the biggest one with the pharmacists. Not that we do the accreditation for them, but we help them to establish it at the European level, and what are the background of it. Training of our reviewers who have e-modules and material coming up to train them properly, and also a lot of emphasis in sorting out any bias and conflict of interest in CME CPD. The 2 next slides are massively important, and this is a game-changing issue in the history of accreditation in Europe. When IACME was established, the philosophy of it was an event takes place in Spain, which is in the Spanish language for Spanish colleagues. This is the business of the Spanish colleagues to accredit it. An event takes place in Spain, which is an international event. This comes to the UEMS for accreditation. Upon the initiative of CIFORMEC and the General Medical Council of Spain, We go now one step further. And over the last year, with their initiative and their agreement and their enormous hard work, which is tremendously appreciated, they have established a system where Spanish events for Spanish colleagues in the Spanish language come through C4MEC. C4MEC has adapted the platform of the UEMS as it is, translated, of course, in the Spanish language. And then we have the usual IACME principles for a triangle accreditation, because the C4MEC is doing the national review. There is the UEMS office with a Spanish-speaking colleague offering the UEMS experience, and then the Spanish representative, the formal delegate of Spain, in the section relevant to the event, does the specialist review. So if this is an event in cardiology in Spain, the formal Spanish delegate in the UEMS section of cardiology will do the review. And immediately, the colleagues who attend the Spanish event, they convert their credits into European credits. So this is a completely new era. We are immensely grateful to C4MEC and the General Medical Council and all Spanish colleagues for their initiative. And I can tell you that countries are now queuing to do the same. Your next door neighbors, the Portuguese, will follow, and then the Italians, and then the Greeks, and then Turkey, and then the list goes on and on and on. And also, remember I said Spain is the window of Europe to the Spanish-speaking world, thanks to the good offices of the General Medical Council of Spain and the Portuguese Medical Association. We work very closely with CONFEMEL, the Federation of the National Medical Associations of Central and South America, to build a partnership of collaboration in CME-CPD between Central and South America and Europe. It's work in progress. It is not easy, of course. It requires an enormous amount of work, but it's on the right track, and we are very, very grateful to the colleagues who have worked on that. New projects. We have a project about accreditation of clinical skill centers, massively important, and also our participation in the European reference networks. We are establishing an e-portfolio that will be available to all colleagues across Europe if they want to enter the process of European training and accreditation. We support European fellowships, and this is hugely important. So we support the collaboration between centers and the rotation of trainees between centers in Europe to be able to obtain accreditation. Because the way it works in the modern world, many countries are saying, in my country, nobody will be able to do so many mastectomies or colectomies to be able to get accredited. So we support the collaboration of centers and the rotation of the trainee so that they will have the qualifications needed to be able to get accredited. And we are establishing the European Council on CME-CPD that aims to bring under its umbrella everybody with a say in Europe, in this world, so that you can have a common ground and a common platform and a common vehicle of collaboration. And I will close with this. These are two of the great people that established the European projects 70 years ago. Robert Schuman said, Europe will not be built on one day or in one way. And we always need to remember that. Sometimes many colleagues are in a hurry. We want this tomorrow morning. It doesn't happen this way in Europe. Because in Europe, we don't believe in the dominance of the individual or the survival of the fittest. We believe in consensus. Consensus is painful, so consensus is time-consuming, is difficult, but when it happens, it's massively, massively powerful. And that's very important. And also Jean Monnet said, nothing is impossible without people. Nothing is lasting without institutions. And in the UEMS, we invest in both. We invest in people who drive the projects. We invest in the processes and the institutions that ensure their sustainability. Thank you so very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Papalois. I told you he was a crack. He is actually. Fine. We have a few questions here from the discussors. I don't know whether you had the opportunity to read them. It doesn't matter. Not a problem. And but anyway, we have answered a few of them. So to make this thing a bit agile, I'm going to ask the discussers to ask you directly the questions. Do you want to ask Rosa?
The quality of care requires competency in professional ethics, safety culture, and rationalization of the resource. How you think that this aspect has been considered in the assessment of professional in this way?
Yeah. First of all, you used a very important word, competency-based. Okay? And this is a battle we give in Europe. Because as it stands in European legislation, you are assessed as a specialist and accredited as a specialist, not based on competency, but on time of training. So you are 5 years in an orthopedic project. No matter if you were sleeping and drinking coffee those 5 years, finally you will get accredited. Okay? We don't want that. We want competency-based to make sure that somebody knows what to do. This is the key. And it's a battle to be able to convince the Commission to adapt it. We hope they will do it. The current Commission is much more friendly. We are very fortunate because the new President of the European Commission is a doctor as well. She's a gynecologist. She's a gynecologist by training. So we have a great opportunity to be able to promote that. Now, the second answer to your question. If you go through the European training requirements, and if you go to the UEMS website, you can see them, all of them. They have these pylons that I told you. They have the clinical skill, they have the academic skill, the writing of papers, the PhDs, but also issues related to professionalism and behavior. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you have, over the years of your training, took the right courses, demonstrate the right behavior, that you are an ethical, person, that you are able to function in a team and in a hospital. And I have to admit, we are not where we want to be for that. It is there, but not as well developed. And this is what we want to do in the years ahead of us, because it's much, much, much important.
Napolentinos, in behalf of Salvador Tranche, who has just left to catch the flight. 3 questions. First one is the who should assess doctors in the professional practice. You have spoken about colleges, administration, Ministry of Health, professional associations, other bodies, all of them together in consensus. I suppose that's the best, but I don't know if there are some ones who are more prepared or more close to do this task. Which one?
Shall I answer
in
this
your
one
opinion,
first?
what do you think is the best option? Yeah.
My direct answer to what you're asking, doctors should assess doctors. That's the principle. Now, how they're going to do it? Through organizations of doctors, like the UEMS, of course, and other that they do this credibly. They have experience to do it. Of course, what you do needs to be recognized at the national level through legislation. It cannot be done just because we want to do it, but this is another level. But you must never have any kind of bureaucrats, third parties, or God knows what else, to be involved in medical assessment. Doctors assess doctors through the associations and the organizations that they are put together to do it. I presented you the work of our organization, for which we're very proud. There are other organizations in this world doing this equally, credibly, and we are very, grateful to that. But never third-party involvement, never bureaucratic involvement in this process.
Okay, second question. What to assess? And here there has been some critics. That maybe continuing medical education activities are necessary, but not sufficient to ensure professional competence. How does UEMS understand that continuing medical education activities should be? Who should determine it? And should it be, for example, voluntary or mandatory?
No, you put everything there. Let me try to answer.
Many questions in one question.
And this is the point of our debate, actually, of our discussion. Let me answer can you repeat the first point?
Yeah, the first is, how does, is sufficient to ensure professional competence?
You asked me something else. You said, what should be assessed? That is the first question. What should be assessed?
What to assess, yes.
Remember the pylons. Competency, the overarching principle, not time, competency. Secondly, clinical, academic, and overall professional behavior. And these 3 in equal measure. The time that somebody was saying, I'm an amazing surgeon, I'm a star, and by the way, I sexually harass women, insult colleagues, and God knows what else, is come and gone. Okay? If you cannot do all 3 together, you are not a proper specialist. So we give equal measure to all 3 of them. So this is to what is going to be assessed. And we have it in detail in our training requirements. The second thing is if it's going to be voluntary or compulsory. The position of the UEMS always, it is to be compulsory. To be voluntary, to be voluntary. I mean, compulsory, what does it mean compulsory? If you get into the business of compulsory, you immediately get into the technicalities. So you need 40 credits a year. What does that mean exactly? Why not 45? Why not 36? You get into technicalities that convert CME CPD into a bureaucracy, which is meaningless. We believe that doctors are good people, and doctors want to do CME CPD. What they want is not to impose anything to them, but to give them the tools to do it. Once you give them the tools to do it, they do it. And all the data around the world show very, very clearly that when you do that, people do it even more compared to places where it's compulsory. So we believe it should be voluntarily, but at the same time, give people the tools and the stimulation to do it, okay? Now, the next thing is how to make it meaningful, and this is extremely important, okay? Because if you see the applications we get from all over the world in IACME, some of them are just, you can see that it's just an educational exercise to say, I did a course, it was wonderful, 20 people came, everybody was happy, and they left. Now, is it going to help people in real life? Not really. So we give emphasis exactly on that. We accredit events that when people finish them, they have something to take, and they will go on Monday to the hospital, and they will start implementing them. I'm giving a very gross example, but this is how we really see it. And this is in the accreditation process. So if you see, has anybody been an IACME reviewer by any chance in the room? Arkady, you have been an IACME reviewer, isn't it? You have seen IACME applications? You have seen IACME applications. One of the things that say, how did you assess educational needs? How do you know that what you are doing is useful to people? You have to prove it. You cannot say, I'm the big professor and I believe this is fine. No, I'm sorry, it's not good enough. You have to say, I surveyed people, I had focus groups, people told me that they need it. You have to prove it. And one of the working groups we have now with the IACME is to produce some guidelines as to how you can do this properly. Did I miss a question? I'm pretty sure there were a few other ones. I'm very happy to answer them. Okay.
Mila Garcia, hi. Following her, I think that the question is voluntary or obligatory is a discussion that comes from I don't know how many years. But the point is, if you are based on competencies, you leave it voluntarily, you have to assess that as medicine moves, those competencies are acquired, voluntary or obligatory. But I think, which is not done in general, so it's not the number of credit, I think is how do you get those new competencies that are coming out all the time. But I think one of the points behind that question is not if it is voluntary or obligatory, is who is responsible to keep doctors or physicians updated, because the point behind is who pays. And if it is the administration on the national health system, as the UK or here, is voluntary the physician that has to go and get trained, or is the responsibility of the system that they are updated and to the new point? So I think that behind the real question is who is responsible, who pays. If you have a primary care physician, in a hospital it's easier, you have a team or something, so you may be substituted. But if you are in a rural area and you are a family doctor or a community doctor or whatever we call it in different places, you need a substitution to go somewhere and to get trained. So I think the question is who pays and then who is responsible for keeping the doctors updated.
Very, very interesting questions. Let's start with, with the end product. We have certain requirements. So you want to get accredited in Europe, because we're talking about the European level, you know the requirements. You know what you need to do to get there. And not only but we support you to get there. Then, as a professional, you decide that in order to be able to get into this, I need to follow my training in Spain or Italy or whatever. I need to do this kind of courses. I need to have this kind of academic activity. I believe that the issue is to provide at the hospital level, at the national level, the opportunities to the doctor to be able to do it. And then experience shows that doctors are good enough and ethical enough to follow them all the way to getting the right CME CPD that they really need. I mean, experience shows that any kind of imposing practices that either you will take this course or will chop your legs off, they really don't work. Usually they have exactly the opposite effect because people just avoid this kind of stuff. They don't engage with all this. Now, who pays? I mean, we're always advocating that if you have a system where you want doctors to provide a service to the country, the service to the patient, the state has the obligation to subsidize this to a certain level. then it is the obligation of the individual also to allocate resources towards this direction as well. And finally, when it comes to, how can I put it, funding from other sources, for example, foundations, industry, and so forth, we accept that this could be done in the form of an unrestricted educational grant. So, as you know very well, what is forbidden once and for all, and you don't accept it ethically as well, is for a pharmaceutical company to say, we will give money to this doctor to go to this congress. This is completely out of the picture because this is clearly has bias. It means that we are paying you to learn something that will be useful to us, and of course, because we paid you, we have a control on you. But there is nothing wrong if the pharmaceutical company goes to the director of the department and says, we give you 10,000 euros to use them in any way you like to support the trainees that you will select that deserve training. You will select your top 10 trainees to send them to this congress. Your criteria, okay? Only thing we want is to say thank you to us that we supported you, and this is where it ends. There is nothing wrong with that. Or a foundation to do this, a charitable organization, or a university. So this is how we see it. This debate between compulsory and voluntary, I mean, goes on, as you said, for a long time. Our position overall, and I think the experience and the data show that when it's voluntary is much more powerful compared to when it's compulsory. And also wherever it is compulsory, it never prevented doctors from being bad doctors. I mean, in the UK, you have a compulsory system. It didn't stop Harold Shipman. It didn't stop this horrible person who was doing mastectomies, just for money, with no indication for women, and the list goes on and on and on. So something being compulsory doesn't mean it is efficient. We believe in the power of the doctors.
Elena Polentinos, a different issue. Recertification. Okay. So.
You open up big topics this morning.
I know it was not focus center in this topic, the presentation, but I would like to know your opinion on it, because examinations, knowledge, academic learning, it doesn't capture professional performance. So what do you think should be, how do you think that assessment can be improved? Should it be a periodicity for the recertification, and patients' opinions should be incorporated, for example, in this recertification?
I mean, this is a massive issue, and it's an ongoing debate. Now, you can have the two extremes. You can have the American type of extreme, whereas, first of all, let me start from someplace else. We believe that overall, it is important to ensure, it is ethically important to ensure that we are up to date and up to speed to practice. Just because I got certified in surgery 20 years ago doesn't mean that I'm still competent to practice surgery 20, 25 years later. It is my obligation to be cutting edge. It is my obligation to update myself. So there is a need there. There is no debate about it. Now, how do you ensure that this is happening? You have the American system where you have to take the board exam every X years, and it's, either you pass or fail. You might have the Nobel Prize ×3. If you fail the exam, you lose your license. It's as simple as that. Okay, this is the draconian way, all right? This is the other way to say we leave it completely on the loose and everybody can do whatever they want. And it's the middle way, which I believe is the most appropriate, to say we don't impose any timing into this, or any specific points and stuff, but to say that as professionals we recognize we have this ethical obligation. It is part of our CME CPD process to do it. And what again it is important is to give people the tools to be able to do it. So we see it as an ethical and professional obligation, but we don't see it as something that can be imposed in any way, especially when it comes to forcing re-examinations or any kind of this nature. This is the overall position of the UEMS. And I can tell you, we have in the United Kingdom, where I live and work, we have, as you know, the GMC, the revalidation, as we call it, every 5 years. My revalidation is coming in February, up in 2020. And what is in there is a box-ticking exercise. I mean, you say basically, this is what you have done. You give a questionnaire to patients that, yourself you give a questionnaire to patients to say if you're wonderful or not. And finally somebody says, oh my God, he's wonderful, he gets revalidated. Does this change anything for me as a clinician? I don't think so, to be honest with you. And still, we haven't seen any data coming to say that this process, which is now going on for a few years, really made a difference someplace. Really was something that was, game-changing. Nobody feels any game change because of this. We know that we have to do it. It's another box-ticking exercise. Even the thing about the patients. You know what would be meaningful? To say that we will give this questionnaire for Professor Papalois for the patients he saw last year to the 1st, the 5th, the 10th, the 15th one randomly. Randomly, completely. And then you will see what kind of feedback comes back. Because if you give me the questionnaire, you know what patients I'm going to select, all the ones that believe I'm a god. I'm not going to give it to anybody who believes that I'm not a god, evidently. So all this converts finally into a process which is box ticking, and no substance at the end of the day. I haven't seen any data, real data, not hypothesis, that says that it changed anything in the real world. So what we believe is that we see it as professionals, but this we have to admit as professionals, that it is our obligation to be cutting edge, to be up to speed. It's not for fun. And then we need the tools to be able to do it properly.
Pablo Lara, thank you very much for your excellent overview, and I would say that thank you very much, especially for the great work you are doing. I will appreciate this some more explanation on how to assess professional behavior. What do you think about that topic, and how? And also to ask you for undergraduate students. In Spain, we have 42 School of Medicine. We have more than 40,000 doctors of the future. How can we prepare them?
Let me start with your second question. First of all, the UEMS, to be very clear, we don't have a portfolio that addresses medical students. We have the European Medical Students Organization working with us in our projects, and actually what we try to do is to have medical student representation and trainee representation in all the sections that we have so that they could give their opinion. And sometimes we send them as quality control assessors in the exams, because at the end of the day, they are at the receiving end of it, and they can tell us if it's fit for purpose. But we don't have a portfolio for education and training at the undergraduate level. In the future is another matter, but at the moment we don't. Okay? Now, the second thing, how do you assess professional behavior? And as I told your colleague who asked before, we have it there. We give it some indications. Okay, so you have to have references, of course, that say that you are a professional. You have to have, demonstrate that attended some courses about this. But we don't know exactly how. It's work in progress. And this is where I need your help. This is where I need your recommendations about it. Because remember I said, the bottom-up approach, not the top-down. I can wake up tomorrow morning in the Domus Medica Europea and say, this is the way to do it, how to assess behavior. Spread it across Europe and tell them by tomorrow morning they have to be compliant. This is the recipe for catastrophe. But I want to hear from you, not only from you, from the Portuguese colleagues and the Norwegian colleagues and all colleagues, how you believe it should be done. Because it is a massive issue, I agree with you. And I don't have an answer on a plate. I don't. So proposals are more than welcome as to how it can be done in a way, again, that is meaningful. I mean, we can all say that if you attend this course, it's fine. So you can send a criminal into a course and they can pass the course. Is it fine? So how can we do it? What are your thoughts? And I'm honestly, completely and utterly open to suggestions. Do you have any? Please, yes, I'm very open. Please, tell me.
Jose Repullo, I want to know what about the issue of distance learning future for the UEMS approach. And regarding the issue of behavior, I think that the medical organization have a really good project that is called Buen Que Hacer, Profesional, good behavior approach for very short case courses that probably we will put in action in the next few months.
That is massively important, and thank you for letting me know about this. So what I would respectfully request is to send this information to us, always through the National Medical Association, through the General Medical Council. This is how we always work. Everything comes through our medical association, which is the formal representative of the UEMS, to avoid any misunderstandings, any problems, any issues. Please send this information and any other proposals. I'm not expecting that we will solve this issue in the next 5 minutes. I mean, this would be totally unrealistic. But as the ideas come in, please send them in. And we start the same stance for the whole of Europe, and then we can all have something meaningful for all of us. This project I will read with extreme interest. Is it available in English, sir, as well, in any way?
We're working in that.
I mean, we can always translate it, but...
Professor Repullo is the president of the Foundation for Medical Education of the Spanish Medical Council. And these little leaflets are good medical behavior with very small things, but very direct.
We'll be delighted
it's a very good
to
idea to take it to UEMS.
We'll be delighted to have it because we are building on this. This is literally work in progress. Your other question, sir, was about distal learning. And I gather you refer to e-learning material and access. And exactly this is what we have done with the ACME 2.0. Now we accredit e-learning material in the context of an individual module, okay, in the context of an e-learning platform, in the context of an app, in the context of an e-library, and the list is increasing by the day. Because to be honest with you, people today prefer that 1,000,000 times. Why? Because of time restrictions and money. It's so easy for a trainee to say, these 2 hours this morning, on Saturday, I will develop it to an e-learning material, I will get my credits, instead of traveling to Copenhagen, for example, to be able to attend a course for 2 hours. And also what is extremely popular are the webinars. And people love them because they are short, to the point, they can attend them even when they're at work. You have your lunch break, you attend a webinar for an hour, you got your credits, you learn something. So all this is part of our portfolio. And I can tell you it's increasing by the day. I'm astonished what people are putting together actually and how they do things. And happily astonished. But we do get it accredited. Of course, we don't do it immediately because it's a process. That doesn't mean that somebody produces something new, tomorrow morning we get accredited. It has to go through the process to make sure it fits into the ACME criteria. But it happens pretty expeditiously.
The point about this new agreement we have, CEA4MEC with UEMS, we signed 1 year ago. The main thing we will look after that is the main places where the knowledge transmission was done in Spain, but mainly in Europe, was in the hospitals, in the colleges, and the GP centers. And the main thing we were looking with this agreement is for this transmission of knowledge in these small places, for not so many people, we call small life educational events, to be accredited. And doing it that quicker, in Spanish, and cheaper, and with a direct link with UEMS. And that's going to allow Mila, you were saying how it's going to pay for that. That's something we are doing normally in the hospitals. I don't know who is paying for that, but all of us go to the session in the hospital, or in the GP center, or in the college. And the main thing in here is for this knowledge to be accredited, and to be European accredited.
The price issue, because when we put this together with CEA4MEC and the General Medical Council of Spain, we said that the prices will be the prices that Spanish colleagues pay now. Nothing will change. Because if it is to make the prices 10 times more expensive to have a European accreditation, the whole thing will become meaningless. So it doesn't change anything for Spanish colleagues, with the exception that there is an automatic recognition of this credit at the European level. And it's a big difference. And it's a big difference.
And one more question. What do you think about in time? How much time do they have to give us in days per year for any specialist, for the CME training?
Again, this is something that we need to assess as professionals. And it's different in different specialties, for example. And I think the way people see it nowadays is they want to see it incorporated in their day-to-day life. Because it becomes more and more difficult to say, I will take 2 weeks off or 1 week off to go here, there, and everywhere. But it's much easier to attend a webinar, an e-learning material, all sorts of other issues. So people wanted to incorporate it as much as possible in their day-to-day professional life. Now, if it comes because beyond that, you definitely need some days protected to be able to do it. This is something that we don't have a definition for. I mean, again, it has to come from the professionals. And again, it's different because different countries organize their trainings and their hospital work in a completely different way. So there is no magic recipe, is the answer to your question, Thomas. But we are open to proposals about this. And we will respect, the differences between countries. What is your view? What do you think?
Well, my view is what we have in here now. In Spain, we have 5 days per year to actualize our knowledge. And it's clearly insufficient. It's 5 years for an anesthetist. It's minimum.
So it's 5 days per year
5
for
days per
a
year
specialist.
For a specialist.
For a specialist.
It's the same for all specialties. It doesn't matter whether you are a transplant surgeon or an anesthetist or a GP.
Which is truly minimum. And again, this is another matter. I believe it's a small period of time. I believe you agree with me. If this is the case, then what we need is a formal statement by the Spanish Medical Association, by the General Medical Council of Spain to say, but in our view, this is unacceptable. Then if the Swedes and the Italians and the Norwegians say the same, we can come up with a consensus proposal at the European level that at least so many days per year in Europe have to be protected for CME CPD. But I don't want to make it up. It has to come again from the colleagues who experience on the ground. I understand that you agree that 5 days is minimum, correct? Then the General Medical Council can come with a realistic proposal. And again, we have to be realistic because sometimes we become too aspirational. I want 3 months to be able to start. I mean, we have to offer a job as well. It has to be realistic. But if we have proposals from north, south of Europe, east and west, then we can have a consensus statement to say to countries, pay attention, you have to get to this level. And we can exercise a lot of influence in that.
Rosa Arroyo, in Spain it's 5 days, but can prolongate if you present e-poster, e-communication, if you participate in activities, you know, because it's really different in medical surgery specialties. You need to do course and abilities, skills, tax, and in only medical or the other part is to assist congress. It's different.
Well, I think it's a reasonable approach, but at least you need to have with a ballpark number of days that you need to dedicate. And again, if you, instead of just making it up, you survey colleagues and you see how they feel about it and ask them to be realistic about it. Not that I need 6 months per year for education, because these things will never happen in real life, but realistic about it. Then we can have something that is real, represents people's feelings. And once I have this at the European level, then I can produce a guideline which is real, and then I can exercise influence for this to be implemented. For us to come up in the Domus Medica Europea with a number and say to people, this is the magic number, doesn't mean anything.
José Repullo, what we see looking the different European offers of distance learning is that they use very much short courses. A couple of hours or 3 or something like that. Whilst in Spain, the usual courses tends to be of 20, 40, 50 hours. That is a problem of culture. But I think that it's very important, the influence of UEMS trying to bring webinars, short courses to this approach. I think that it can be very important for changing the way of going into the continuous education processes. Nevertheless, the issue of doctors in primary care and rural areas is that they probably need some additional help to get into the continuous training, because hospitals have built-in resource for managing many issues of knowledge management and training. Probably issues like the days off in work must to be different for specialists in the hospital or specialists in primary healthcare.
Yeah. 2 points to make. First of all, about the time. What we do is we accredit an educational hour. This is the unit. Okay? And in this hour, this is the minimum. You cannot offer education for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. An hour is the minimum unit. And this minimum unit has to meet all the criteria. Now, you can have in 1 hour, which is very credible. For example, Tomas organizes in Santander a webinar about something in anesthesiology, beautiful, perfect, organized, accredited. At the same time, the European Society of Anesthesiology have a massive website and e-learning platform that has hundreds of modules about anesthesiology. This also gets accredited. And then the trainee or the professional goes in the platform and say, I will take 1, 2, 3. It doesn't have to be all the platform or nothing. The platform is accredited, but then you get the credits for the amount of work that you do, from 1 hour to 150 hours, if this is what you want to do, basically. So this is how we work. This is how we work. And you made another point, the second point, kindly remind me.
The issue of primary care.
Exactly. Precisely. Now, and you hit a very sensitive chord there. because we have the tendency to give the emphasis of the doctor in the hospital or the academic doctor in the hospital. We forget the doctor in primary care and private practice. Okay? There are many, many, many doctors in Europe that they are in private practice, and they do it very credibly, very properly, and they support patients on the ground. The primary care physician colleagues, as you know, at the moment there is an independent medical organization in Europe representing them, but primary care, family practice, general practitioners, the different name in every country, they are recognized as specialists in most European countries, including in Spain. So we need to have educational products that address their needs as well. And this is something that we bring into the process. So when somebody applies for accreditation, we try to tell them, do you address also the needs of the general practitioners? Because they are majority of the practitioners actually on the ground. And also we try to enhance processes that facilitate the CME CPD of colleagues in the private practice care. Because we are always complaining, I'm working in the hospital, I don't have enough days or enough funding. But still we have some days and some funding. Colleagues in private practice don't have anything. There is no funding, there is no organization, there is no support, and every day they will take out to be able to get educated, they will lose income. We have our protected salary, they don't. And we can't just leave them and ignore them. So this is another piece of work that we're doing at the moment to be able to cover these two areas of the spectrum, beyond the hospital doctor and the academic doctor.
Elena Polentinos. Just to clear it up, primary care doctors or GPs are represented as a specialty in the UEMS?
No, is the answer directly. At the moment, there is another European medical organization, the UEMO, that represents general practitioners. General practitioners, are, however, are recognized as specialists in the vast majority of European countries. So we work closely with them. We have no intention to be autocratic and take over the organization or anything, but what is our obligation is all this material for education to ensure that it covers their needs as well. Okay? Because a general practitioner that will go to a Congress of Cardiology or attend an e-learning material in cardiology has a different perspective of looking at it than the specialist who deals with putting stents in small arteries, right, left, and center, and all the rest of it. So we try to put in our accreditation criteria to the providers, please think of this dimension as well when you produce something. And it's to their interest because they attract a bigger audience. It's not, it's beneficial to them as well. And now we try to think, and this is one of the big things that we have to address in the next executive that will be elected in October, how we can address the needs of colleagues in private practice. Okay? It's massively important. We keep on forgetting them, and we must not forget them because they do an excellent job, and they are self-employed. And they don't have the protection we have for a permanent salary, and I don't know how many of you work in university hospital, but I think most of us do. They don't have the advantage of a protected salary and an institution that will give them at least some of days for CME, CPD that they are covered. Whatever they do, they have to pay for themselves and lose income. We must never forget them, and we'll have to find a way to support them as well.
Mila García, de nuevo. How do you, in e-learning or webinars or that type, how do you assess that actualization of competencies, and I don't want to say learning, has taken place? Maybe in kind of knowledge-based things, you can assume it might have happened, but if you are a surgeon, well, at least you have I guess, peer review when you are performing. So how would you assess that type of acquisition of competencies?
This is such a big issue, and it's not only for e-learning, it's for any kind of learning. Let me give you an example. We had this magnificent congress in Copenhagen. Of course, I'm biased because I organized it, but it was a very nice, it was the best, absolutely, absolutely. Let's praise ourselves, it always helps. But it was a very successful congress, and it got 28 IACME credits, okay? So people go into the room of a fantastic session, an amazing session, and they come out of the room. And we assume that these people, during this session, pay attention, learn something, tomorrow morning they can implement them into their practice. It could be that this individual was sleeping during the whole session, or this individual was answering emails on the mobile phone. Have you seen that before? People, I'm sure you have. Or God knows what, they were chatting with their colleagues, okay? Do you have a way to prove that something changed? And people come into this, then the madness done, draconian measures. You have to have people watching. If people watching, you have to have, listen, I'm not going to convert Yakme into the Gestapo. This is ridiculous. Okay? This is absolutely ridiculous. We are not going to follow people step by step behind in a Congress to see if they are paying attention, if they are awake, or if they looked at their mobile phones. I start from the principle that doctors are good people, and when they go into a room to see a session, they learn something out of it. Okay? That's the principle I respect. It's the same thing about the bias from the industry. We have certain rules as to how industry can be in a Congress. They have to be in a certain area. You cannot impose to people to go to the exhibition area. They cannot have advertisements in the rooms. Then people start saying to me, what about if you have a bag with a logo of a company or a pen here? I said, this is getting into the face of ridiculous. We are not going to convert Yakme into a police, going behind people and checking their jackets and their pockets if they have anything. This is pathetic and ridiculous. I take it that doctors are good people and they know how to avoid bias. We have certain overarching rules and they will respect them. So the answer is to your question, two things. We put emphasis on the doctor, and we believe that the doctor who will be in a room to learn will learn. And then we put together in place, and this where your question comes extremely timely, we have a working group to see how this education that obtained really changed people's practice. So we put emphasis on two things. We have two working groups. Please join. Feel free to join. They are open to participation. One, to set up the standards for assessing the needs of the person who needs CME CPD. And secondly, another group to see how we can have practical ways that people can prove that when I went to Copenhagen and came back, A, B, and C was useful on Monday morning in my practice. These are the two areas. But we are not going to get into the business because there is no way to do it, to prove that people were alert in a session. Same with the webinars. It could be that I opened my computer and the computer was open and I was watching football. The webinar finished and I pressed the button for the questions, end of story. Okay? Can I prove that all these people were watching the webinar and they were not watching Barcelona or Real Madrid or both of them or whatever? I mean, it's completely impossible to do it. I put faith on the doctor, and we have these two working groups to see how we can, first of all, assess their needs properly, and secondly, people to tell us, yes, it did change my life, professional life, in that and that way. Please join the groups. It's work in progress, and this is where we need your input.
One more question. How important do you think it is for UEMS to, Tomás Cobo, how important do you think it is for UEMS to have a direct link with European MPs, with the European Commission, with the European Council, to explain them, to help them to understand what are the problems of the medical profession? I think we somehow have lost that direct communication from the
Thomas,
European point of view.
You are a veteran and you know very well that we are way behind in that. Okay? This is the plain truth. We have to be truthful. And we're trying to catch up. So we had meetings recently over the last year, quite a few meetings with DG Sante, formally at the Domus Medica Europea, to find common ground of work. But what we want to do is not, for the executive to have a drink with the new commissioner, pictures, social media, and the world is a better place to live. This is meaningless completely for the professionals. We want to find ways that really will help the professionals. Now, one message that came from the European Commission, because I met them again in Copenhagen, there was a formal delegation of DG Sante there. They want proposals from the profession for cross-cutting themes for research for Horizon Europe. As you know, Europe 2020 is finishing now, basically, and Horizon Europe is 125 billion euros investment in research and development in Europe, not only for medicine. This is for everything under the sun. But the Commission wishes to have proposals of themes to be funded. And they want cross-cutting themes. They will not fund something that says, we want to advance this specific little issue in cardiology. They want something which is meaningful to all sections, like CME CPD, like digitalized health. I'm just making it up, just these kind of things. So what they told me is go to your sections and your national medical associations and ask them what they would like to see as cross-cutting themes in Horizon Europe, so that they will get it to the Commission to increase the chances of funding. And what I told them is that if I ask them to do this exercise, the next thing they're going to ask me, is anybody going to listen? And is anybody going to do something about it? And they said, rest assured, we will put you in touch with the person who is directly responsible for this kind of funding and orienting the funding, and you'll be able to have a direct link. It's not guaranteed, but increases the chances dramatically of getting it. So we need to come to a consensus, national medical associations, specialist sections, which are the big, they want 2 or 3, not more than that, big cross-cutting themes that the Commission should fund. For example, research for the care of the geriatric population. This is for all specialties, this is for all people across Europe. Digitalized health, health literacy, this kind of stuff. Because some people come, with proposals, I want to study the effect of this enzyme there and there. This is not for European funding. This is for specialist funding from grant bodies. So this is where we are. And this is the kind of engagement we want with them. And as of once the new council is elected, we will have a special officer dealing with the European Commission and a special person of the Domus on a daily basis.
Pablo Lara, politicians are very important.
That's a question or a statement?
Whatever you prefer. And it's a difficult point. I think we need to prepare good instruments, good systems, independently of politicians. But anyway, in the way you are, what's your relationship with European politicians? Or how do you feel? What will be the future about accreditation, assessments, certification, recertification? What do you think?
First of all, I can answer the question at the context of the European level, not at the national level. But to be honest with you, what happens in Europe happens in countries as well. One thing that we always make fun, politicians, and the fact that they don't care, and the fact that the only thing they care is to be elected, and all these things. But the fact of the matter is that if you see it from their point of view, they have a problem. Usually they have vacuums. So, example, they want quality assurance in training. Okay? People tell them, you need to have quality assurance in training in your country. Okay, I need to have quality assurance training in my country. What am I going to do? And us, as the professionals, we don't go there with a proposal. We leave it there. And then what they do, they come up with one. Or they ask their own people to offer one. So politicians go their own way usually when there is a vacuum. And it is our responsibility to have the right proposals on the table and push for them, to push them in the right direction. So this is the first point. The second point, when it comes to engaging with the Commission and the Parliament, as you know, Europe has many different poles of power. It is the European Council, the prime ministers, that finally have the final say for everything that happens, okay? Then the European Commission, which is the executive branch that translates the wish of the Council into action, and the Parliament, which is the elected officials that have the responsibility for the legislation and to keep the Commission into accountability. So if you engage with one of them, you have failed. You need to engage with all of them. So we have engaged with the European Commission at the moment. The new president of the Commission, the German president, is, as I said, is a gynecologist by training. And the Commissioner for Health is from Cyprus, is a psychologist, a clinical psychologist by training. So there are people who can listen. But also we will engage with the Parliament, with the relevant Commission. So all three things will come together. Where we fail is if we give them proposals which are extremely specific for extremely specific issues with, to extremely, excruciating detail. This is meaningless at the European level. They will support big themes that are important for all people across Europe, regarding of where they're coming from. And this issue of CME, CPD, accreditation, and everything else, we put it on the table for them as their quality, as their way to go. We never propose to them to impose it. Okay? What we say to them is project it, that these are the European standards. Say this is what we adapt as a standard. Okay? If countries want to adapt it or not, okay, of course it's still up to them, but these are the standards. And believe me, once you set the standard, it's very difficult for countries to ignore it. I mentioned the example of transplantation. There are a few countries like Norway, it's obligatory. Austria is obligatory. Okay? Turkey is obligatory. Malta is obligatory, and I can go on. But there are many countries where it's not obligatory. The United Kingdom is not obligatory. There is a formal training system in the UK which is independent. I can tell you, you don't even think of going in an interview in the UK for a transplant job without the European exam. It's considered to be a must. In the exam in Copenhagen, okay, we had the plethora of applicants were from the United Kingdom. Okay, and it's not obligatory. And also when it comes to litigation, there was a case in the not so distant past of a doctor who was a general surgeon by training for the United Kingdom, and he performed a vascular procedure at an emergency setting. The procedure went very well, but then he was accused that although he's not a vascular surgeon, he performed a vascular operation. It happened to be that he had the European diploma in vascular surgery, and the judge said, this is good enough for me. So it shows you the value of it as a quality control marker. So this is the way we see it. We will go to the Commission, we will go to the Parliament and say, project this as the way to go. It is a matter just of time before countries follow. But not to impose it, either this or else. This is the way you have yourself a problem.
The very last one for me. Do you think UEMS can play a role in helping this new opportunity we have in the medical profession with the progressive feminization? Do you think we play a role in there, or we can do something?
What we can do, I mean, obviously, it is a fact of life, first of all. I have 4 children. The 2 ladies are in medical school, not the boys. I mean, it tells you the whole story in my own micro world, actually. It is a very clear phenomenon. It is also very clear, beyond that we have an overall problem with workforce planning. So, and work-life balance. And this is where we can need to come with some very clear proposals as to how things will be done. And we don't at the moment. We don't. We are way behind that. This is an area where the new council has to work on. Because we keep on producing European training requirements, accreditation, great education to be accredited. How are we going to be ready to show that we will have the right number of people, of the right quality, the right skills at the right time, at the right place? And we are so behind in that. Not only us in Europe, everybody's behind. Everybody's behind. The fact of feminization of the medical profession is one element of it. Work-life balance is another element of it. I mean, if you see if you take the European training requirements to the letter, you will see that all countries are not compliant. And the European training requirements are not anything extraordinary when it comes to what is suggested for protecting the rights of people to have rest and leisure and a life as well. And almost no country is really compliant. Perhaps only the Norwegians are compliant with that, but they can afford it. So it's a massive issue. Also, how to convince the youth, the new colleagues, to go to a certain direction. We want to respect the freedom of the individual. We cannot live in a society where we will tell people that you will become a colorectal surgeon or else, because this is what the data show. People need to have a freedom, but they also need to have an understanding that with the road they are following, they will end up unemployed, or they will be serving a handful of people in their lives, and not the majority of them. I mean, to give you an example, in the UK we have a huge problem at the moment covering the on-call for general surgery. Good old-fashioned general surgery. The strangulated hernia and the obstructed bowel and the good old-fashioned general surgery. People simply have gone so much down the road of specialism that they have nothing to do with this anymore. Who's going to do it? Trauma. Trauma is the biggest killer, is the biggest, thing in the modern world, okay? This is the way to go. Very few people can go down this road of getting specialized in trauma surgery. It's difficult to convince them. They believe it's second class for some reason in the world. For some reason in the world. So these are massive, serious problems, and we need to have a very serious and in-depth debate. And again, the debate has to be bottom-up, coming from the national medical associations, from colleagues who run the universities and the hospitals, so that what we debate is, represents what happens in life, and not the ideas that we had on a Monday morning in Brussels over coffee.
Antonio Compain. We are talking about medical continuing education during the last 2 days, and specifically for a medical continuing assessment. But I think that, we think that there are 3 steps in order to assessment: pregraduate, postgraduate, and continuing, yet. The question is, at the moment are responsible for undergraduate studies, how can I do in order to improve the quality of our formation undergraduate, in order to improve the quality of students, but specifically the improve for your work? The question is a good idea to promote a portfolio, for example, a European portfolio undergraduate that you could be in your mind in order to assessment for your work, not for graduate, for your work?
I think it's a very interesting idea. So basically what you are proposing is, these are the training requirements we have, let's say, in orthopedic surgery in Europe, for postgraduate, because it's postgraduate. And then we will prepare a proposal as to how medical schools should prepare their students, so when they get out of medical school, it will be much easier for them to go down this road and get accredited. Is that what you are proposing? Am I correct in saying that?
This is the question, yes.
I think it's an excellent idea. I mean, it's not for the UEMS to dictate curricula to medical schools. This will be completely out of our remit. But to propose certain ways where the undergraduate curriculum can link with the postgraduate one and lead to European accreditation is a fantastic idea, actually. And this is something that we can do. I mean, most of you represent and you lead, great medical schools. And again, gives us your proposals, your ideas as to how this could be done. I found it as an excellent idea. There will be minutes out of these meetings, isn't it, with action points? I'm pretty sure there will be. So please, this proposal, send them over so that because I need to have them as action points and then I can follow on them. But this is a fantastic idea. This is a fantastic idea.
Elena Polentinos, just a comment about something that has come out, that we need education on how professional boards, professional teams and experts here are today together to reach the politicals. I think because we think about our needs in medical education and we see it very specific, and you said to get to the politicians and to get to the decision making organs who are taking political decisions, and it is important, so we need to know these ways, and we need education in this for the people here.
No, your point is well taken. If you go to any kind of politician, nationally or let alone in Europe, and you tell him, you know something, I represent this medical school in Spain or Oslo or whatever, and we want this from you, they will not put a lot of attention into this, because they will say, okay, this is important for one medical school, not important for Europe. But if we go, and this is our job as medical organization, this is why we exist, then you know something? This kind of proposal comes from the from the General Medical Council of Spain, supported by the deans of the medical schools. And then it's the same idea that came in Italy and in Norway and God knows. Then they have to pay attention, because it's not a matter of one school, of one dean in one place. It becomes a pan-European issue. This is where many times we fail. We raise our hands as individuals. We need to raise our hands as professionals across Europe. And that's why I keep on saying, proposals like the proposal from your esteemed colleague just a few minutes ago, it is something that if other countries will endorse it, and I'm pretty sure they will because they face exactly the same problem, then if we knock on the door of the politicians, they will listen. If you go independently and say the medical school in Barcelona wants to do this, I'm just making it up, I mean any medical school, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
I have to tell you, for your happiness, that over the last couple of years, when I came to the General Medical Council as Vice President, I've been working exactly on that. And we have a very small lobby, but we have it in the European Commission with Enrique Terol. We have one in the DG Santé with Paco Sevilla, who is the Spanish Chancellor in the European Council. And we have with every MPs, one of them, of each party. So we've been building this over the last couple of years. And we are telling them, as you said before, main things, main important things, real things, things that they can help. One of them we are working on, we are real advanced, is the Pan-African Medical School. We are planning to do with the Spanish Agency for Cooperation, with the Cuban government, and with the General Medical Council. Main things, big things, clear things, and real things. So we are doing it in Spain, and I think it will be massively important, I'd say, that all the countries, all the medical entities do it the same with each country, with their MPs.
And you mentioned, this is so important, Thomas, thank you for mentioning the MEPs of every country. Because the MEPs, I mean, Spain elected a certain number of MEPs in the last European election, the same thing for the other countries, most unfortunately not in the United Kingdom. But we did elect MEPs in the United Kingdom as well, but hopefully not for the last time as well. But what I want to say is that these MEPs go to Brussels and they don't have an agenda. So they go there, they sit in the parliament and they stare at the ceiling and they vote one way or the other when a proposal comes from the Commission. But what they really like to do is to have an agenda. So if you give them an agenda and you tell them, you know something, for Spain, this issue, for example, a transition point between the undergraduate and the postgraduate curriculum is important for Spain. Then they will start knocking on doors. Then they will start enhancing our voices. And then it makes a very big difference. And they have power in their hands. They have enormous power in their hands. In Brussels, powers, and thank God for that, more and more goes from the Commission to the Parliament, to the elected body. And my prediction is that in the not-so-distant future, the Parliament will be the dominant force, as it is in any kind of developed democracy. They are the elected officials, don't forget, which is hugely, hugely, hugely important. And they don't have an agenda. They are looking for an agenda. And now it's a great opportunity because there is a new Parliament as of the 1st of November, and people will be looking for topics to trumpet and project, to make their presence meaningful.
Okay, Mila Garcia again. Just when, I don't know what I am going to say, it will make any sense or not, but it just came up when Antonio Compag was saying on the link of undergraduate, postgraduate, and CME CPD. And my question, and I said maybe relevant, is just how we could, most of us we work, a lot of us we work on at medical school, so how you could build the interest on medical students or not kill if they have any interest with many medical schools, kills the interest in making the CME CPD throughout their whole life. And I think you should probably, at medical school, you have to be able to do that they will raise that interest that will keep it throughout their life. There is any way, as I say, I don't know if that becomes, because medicine usually they are interested, they are scientific, maybe we have to promote more science, research work, or how you see that we could introduce that kind of interest in medical schools and postgraduates, so they will continue being able to analyze their needs, as you say, if we put it in voluntary basis, analyze their needs, and they say, okay, I have this, that is, I'm not so good, I should go to this. Build that interest from the beginning.
What you said makes perfect sense, and I will give an example. I will give an example about clinical ethics, medical ethics. It used to be medical ethics, for example, when you were mentioning it in a hospital, people were telling you are mad. I mean, these things are not important. I mean, we are wasting our time. I don't have any kind of medical ethical dilemmas in my career at all. Finally, people accepted that medical ethics and clinical ethics is a massive thing of what we do, and we had committees and everything else. Then what happened is that eventually medical schools put it into the curriculum. So they have teaching about medical ethics from the very beginning. And it becomes part of people's culture. So when they go out of the medical school, they are expecting that there will be an ethical debate about certain issues. They are expecting that there will be a committee debating independently an ethical challenge. It is of what they are and who they are. Similarly for CME CPD, since we agree here in this room and beyond that CME CPD is massively important at an postgraduate level and a specialist level, and we also agree that the students should be prepared for this, then we can agree with the medical schools that the concept of CME CPD should be presented in the curriculum with specific examples and with specific opportunities. So when the medical student will come out of the medical school, he or she will demand it, and he will be looking for it, and it will be part of the process. This is the way to work, and this is what can be part of the project, of this transition, let's call it project, or curriculum that your colleague is proposing. I think it makes extremely perfect sense.
Ahora sí que sí. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for coming in.
For the opportunity. It was very interesting.
For your talk. I was telling him before that we shouldn't forget the only reason why we are all in here. We are coming from everywhere. And the only reason we are all in here, we sometimes tend to forget, is that for the patients out there to be safe in our hands. That's the only reason we are only here. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for your talk. Thank you very much for your
idea. Thank you. Thank you very much.